All right, welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. You ready to kind of get those brain juices flowing?
I am looking forward to it.
Excellent, excellent. Well, today we're diving into something pretty monumental, I think you could say, a real turning point in human history. We're talking about the agricultural revolution.
Okay.
We've got some really interesting material here from Yuval Noah Harari's books, Sapiens and Homo Deus.
Ah, excellent books.
Yeah, they're fantastic. And one of the things that really struck me was how they kind of flipped the script on this whole idea of agriculture being this, like, ultimate win for humanity.
Yeah, it's often presented as like the foundation of civilization, right? The key to progress.
Right, exactly. But is that really the whole story?
Maybe not, maybe not.
So let's dig into this a little bit. I mean, when we think about agriculture, we think about, settled life, surplus food, all the things that kind of led to cities and everything else. But Harari, he throws out this term, luxury trap.
Yeah.
What is that all about?
It's this idea that, well, you hit it right. Agriculture brought us benefits, more reliable food supplies, that sort of thing. But like a trap, there's a catch. It also created some long-term problems that we're still dealing with today.
Ah, so it's like we traded in this nomadic lifestyle for something that seemed, well, more comfortable, I guess you could say, but with some hidden costs.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. For example, have you ever heard that after we started farming, humans actually got shorter on average?
Wait, shorter? Really? I always thought, like, progress, meant getting bigger and stronger, like evolving to some superhuman.
Right, it seems kind of backwards, right. But there's skeletal evidence, comparing hunter-gatherer skeletons to early farmers, and the farmers are, well, shorter.
Huh. So what's the thinking there? Like, why would that happen?
Well, the main theory is diet. Hunter-gatherers ate a really varied diet, lots of different plants and animals. But early farmers, they relied on a much smaller number of crops, so their nutrition probably took a hit.
Oh, that makes sense. It's like, when I eat the same thing for lunch every day, I start to feel, I don't know, just kind of blah.
Yeah, exactly. And then on top of that, you've got more people living closer together, closer to animals too.
Right.
And that leads to, well, easier spread of diseases.
Yeah, makes sense. So less varied diet, more disease, not exactly sounding like the progress we've been told about.
Mm-hmm.
And was it just health that was affected, or were there other downsides to this whole farming thing?
Oh, yeah, plenty of downsides. One of the big ones was workload. Think about how much time you spend, getting food today, shopping, cooking, all that.
Yeah, honestly, it can be a lot sometimes, prepping meals and all that.
Right, right. But now imagine you're a hunter-gatherer. Studies suggest they might have only spent maybe 20 hours a week getting food.
Wow, that's way less than me for sure.
Yeah, way less. But early farmers, they could be working 40 hours or more. And not just for themselves either.
Oh, so they're working more, but for what, like a less healthy diet too? That doesn't sound like a great trade-off.
Definitely makes you question that whole progress narrative, doesn't it? And here's where it gets even more interesting. That surplus food, the stuff they worked so hard for, it actually led to some pretty big social changes.
Oh, I see. Because now you've got all this extra food, so you need people to manage it, protect it, right?
Exactly. You need granaries, guards for the granaries, and then, boom, you've got the beginnings of a hierarchy. Warrior classes emerge, then kings, priests, all that.
It's like agriculture, kind of by accident, created the conditions for, like, inequality.
You could definitely say that. A far cry from the more egalitarian societies that many hunter-gatherer groups had.
Huh. So we traded freedom and good health for basically just more food.
It's not quite that simple. Remember, larger populations, more complex societies. There were definitely benefits to this transition alongside the drawbacks. And honestly, that's what makes this whole discussion so fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe worth thinking about, like, how much of those trade-offs we're still living with today.
Oh, absolutely. We're just scratching the surface here. But hey, we've got to leave something for the next deep dive, right?
Right, exactly. Keep them coming back for more.
Yeah.
So we talked about the downsides, but I mean, surely having more food must have been a good thing, right? Like, more people could be supported.
Of course, having a more predictable food supply did allow for settlements to grow and, populations to increase. But this brought its own set of problems, too.
Like what?
Well, I mean, think about it. More people competing for land, for resources, and if the crops failed, well, famine hit a lot harder when you have thousands of mouths to feed instead of a few dozen.
Yeah. So it's like you gain stability on the one hand, but you're also more vulnerable on the other. It's a trade-off.
Exactly. A constant balancing act, really.
Wow. Fascinating. And what about, aside from the physical stuff, was there a psychological impact too? Like if our bodies weren't necessarily thriving on this new farming lifestyle, what about our minds?
That's a great question. Harari actually suggests that our brains, way down deep, are still kind of wired for the savannah, for that life of foraging, moving around, constantly tending crops, worrying about weather, defending your stores. That probably created a whole new level of stress.
Hmm. That actually makes me think about how we're constantly bombarded with information these days. Checking emails, scrolling through social media. It's like we're obsessively checking our crops, even though we're just sitting on the couch.
That's a really interesting parallel. Maybe some of our modern anxieties, that always on feeling, comes from this mismatch between our ancient brains and our modern lives.
Wow. So are we saying that, like, the shift to agriculture was a mistake? Should we all go back to hunting and gathering?
Well, hold on now. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. It's not quite that simple. I mean, we can't just go back in time, right? And besides, agriculture did lead to some pretty amazing advancements. I mean, think about art, technology, writing.
Okay, yeah, good point. We wouldn't have smartphones or podcasts without the agricultural revolution.
Exactly. It's more about understanding that this shift, it was a really big deal. But it wasn't just simply good or bad. It was, well, complex. It had huge and lasting effects, some positive, some, well, not so much.
Right, right. So we're living with that legacy today. But I'm curious, do we see any of those, like, same patterns playing out in how we do agriculture now?
Oh, absolutely. Think about the last time you were at the grocery store. How many different kinds of tomatoes did you see?
Hmm. Probably just a few, I guess. Like the standard ones.
Exactly. That's monoculture in action. We rely on just a handful of high-yield varieties for a lot of our crops.
And what's wrong with that? Isn't it good to have, like, efficient farming?
Well, it makes our food system really vulnerable. Think about those early farmers relying on just a few staple crops. If one of those crops gets wiped out by disease, well, everybody's in trouble.
Oh, right. So it's like putting all your eggs in one basket, kind of.
Exactly. Plus, monoculture, it really depletes the soil. And then you need all those pesticides and fertilizers, which, well, they have their own set of problems for the environment.
So it's like, are we repeating the mistakes of the past, but on like a global scale this time? We're still kind of stuck in that cycle of producing more and more food, but at what cost?
You got it. It's this question of how we define progress, right?
Hmm.
Are we really progressing if we're sacrificing long-term sustainability for, well, short-term gains?
Right, right. So if we are kind of caught in this luxury trap, as Harari calls it, how do we break free?
Right.
We can't just like abandon agriculture altogether.
No, of course not. But we can learn from the past. It starts with, well, being aware, understanding how our food systems work, the impacts they have on our health, on the environment.
So doing our research, reading labels at the grocery store, thinking about where our food is even coming from.
All of that. And supporting sustainable practices.
Yeah.
Like buying locally grown produce, choosing organic options when you can. Even small choices, when enough people make them, they can really add up.
Okay, that actually makes me feel a little better. Like we're not totally powerless. We can make choices that, well, make a difference.
Exactly. It's not about being perfect, it's about progress. And it's a conversation we all need to be having, not just thinking about it by ourselves.
Right, talking to friends, family, even online, getting those ideas out there.
Absolutely sharing information, questioning things, working together to make change happen.
Okay, so we've talked about some of those downsides of agriculture and some things we can do, maybe to make better choices going forward. But I guess zooming out a little, what's the big takeaway from all of this?
I think for me, it's that progress, well, it isn't always what it seems. What looks like a win in the short term might have consequences down the road. And that applies to, well, a lot of things in life, not just agriculture.
Like technology, always chasing the latest gadgets, but are they really making our lives better? Or just, I don't know, more distracted, more disconnected?
It's definitely something to think about, right? We need to be critical of the systems we create. Ask ourselves, what kind of future are we building?
Yeah. And are we building a future that, I don't know, prioritizes well-being, sustainability,
Yeah.
justice? Or are we just kind of repeating the same patterns, exploitation, inequality, all that?
Tough questions, but important ones. The choices we make today, well, they really shape the world we'll live in tomorrow.
Big stuff to think about.
Mm.
So how do we, as we navigate this complex world, how do we avoid falling into that trap of assuming more is always better? How do we build a future that's, well, more aligned with our values?
It starts with awareness, I think. Really understanding that history is complicated. Even things that seem positive can have, well, unintended consequences.
So learning from the past, recognizing patterns, and being more thoughtful about the choices we make, even the small ones.
Exactly. And remembering that, well, we're all in this together. The choices we make, even the ones that seem small, they have ripple effects. They impact other people, the planet.
Right, that whole butterfly effect thing. Small actions can lead to big changes. But where do we even begin? Like, where can we as individuals start to make those changes?
Well, it's like we were saying before, those small everyday choices we make, they really do matter. Think about the food you buy, the products you use, how you interact with technology. Every decision can be a chance to, well, to live out your values.
So being a conscious consumer, questioning our digital habits,
Yeah.
maybe even making more time for, I don't know, things that nourish our souls instead of just our wallets.
Exactly. It's about remembering that real progress. Well, it isn't just about stuff. It's about building a world where everyone can thrive, where we're in harmony with nature, where our actions actually reflect, well, what we truly care about.
Okay, yeah, that's a vision worth striving for. It's a good reminder that even though, yeah, there are these big challenges, we still have the power to choose, to create, to actually make a difference.
It's a choice we make every day, and all those choices multiplied across, well, everyone, they really can create a powerful wave of change.
It's almost like we need to, I don't know, redefine what progress actually means. It shouldn't just be about, bigger and faster. It should be about creating a world that's sustainable and just for everyone.
I completely agree. We need to think about progress in a more holistic way, one that takes into account the well-being of people and the planet.
So what would that look like? In practice, what are some steps we can take to create that kind of future?
I think it starts with recognizing that we're all connected, right? Like we're part of this huge web of systems, and every choice we make, even if it seems small, it has ripple effects. It impacts things beyond just ourselves.
So it's not just about our individual actions then. It's about like systemic change too.
Exactly. We need to be advocating for policies that, support sustainable agriculture, promote fair labor practices, protect the environment, using our voices, using our votes to create a world that, well, that actually reflects our values.
So it's both then. Individual responsibility and collective action.
That's it. It's a both-hand situation, being mindful of our own choices, working together to build a more just and sustainable world.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You can't just sit back and wait for someone else to fix things, right?
Yeah.
We have to be involved in creating the future we want.
And remember, we have the tools, we have the knowledge to do it. What we need now is, well, the collective will to actually make it happen.
It's exciting to think about what's possible. If we all start making more conscious choices, working together, it's like we're at this turning point, and we can choose a different path, one that leads to a more sustainable and just future.
And we make that choice every single day. All of those choices, they add up, and they have the power to, well, really transform our world.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious, what's your personal takeaway from exploring the agricultural revolution? What's sticking with you the most?
For me, it's a reminder that progress isn't always a straight line. It's complex, sometimes messy, and it comes with consequences, both good and bad. And it's up to us to be aware of those consequences and make choices that, well, align with what we believe in.
I love that. Awareness, responsibility, choosing a path that reflects our values. That's a powerful message.
And it applies to everything, really, not just agriculture.
So well said. And to our listeners out there, we encourage you to keep exploring these ideas. Think about how modern agriculture affects your life. What choices can you make to create a more sustainable and just food system? Share your thoughts with us, with friends and family, even online. Keep the conversation going.
Because this isn't just about the past, it's about the future we want to create. And that future, well, it starts with each and every one of us.
That's a great place to end things. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the agricultural revolution. Keep those brains buzzing and those hearts open to the possibilities of a better world. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.